So in this episode, I want to talk about player skill in the OSR, particularly in relation to the second Zen moment from Matthew Finch's seminal OSR text, A Quick Primer to Old School Gaming, where he says, player skill, not character attributes. I think the phrasing is something of a misnomer because character attributes are important in the game, even in OSR style games, because they're going to determine bonuses. They're going to determine whether you succeed at tasks often, because often rolling under a character's attributes is used as sort of a basic level skill system in a lot of OSR contexts and games and gaming tables. But I don't think he literally meant not character attributes. I think what he was trying to say was use the character sheet for resources and not for defined answers. So you're not going to look for, hey, I have this specific skill at this specific level of expertise, and therefore I'm going to use it in this situation. But just looking at what your character is capable of and what your character has around him. And this was really crystallized when I was looking over part of the old companion set, the section of that book under mass combat called the War Machine. It was a system of doing mass combat in the companion part of the Begme system. And it had a lot of different things that don't really matter in this context, but they had a list of assumptions. And the fourth assumption was a character knows how to survive in the D&D world. The player does not need to know the tactics of war. And I think that struck me as very important in terms of what player skill is. Now, in a previous episode, I given my definition of player skill as the ability to use character knowledge and experience as part of that knowledge to help the character have a better chance of being successful in the game world. And I think the way all this ties together is that if you go back to the War Machine quote and replace the last part so that it reads, a character knows how to survive in the D&D world, the player doesn't need to know the details, just what the character knows and is capable of. And that includes not only something like basic attributes, which will come into play from time to time, but also things like inventory management, which tends to be something that it's very old school. A lot of games that are OSR style games try to simplify inventory management by breaking it down into a sort of a slot system so that it's easier to keep track of. But, the inventory, what you carry in an OSR game is as important as defining who your character is and what they're capable of as the stats on the page or their level or their class. And that's why a lot of old school style games, you'll see things like the 50 feet of rope and the 10-foot pole and bundles of torches or a lantern and especially oil for a lantern, which can be used for other things than just the lantern. People frequently use it to set things on fire, including monsters. And how you use the tools at your disposal, whether it's the tools the character has as part of who they are, or the tools that they carry with them and actively try to acquire, and the knowledge that they have and actively try to acquire. Because in an old school game, sometimes it's just as important to ask around about where you're going so that you have a better idea of what you'll face when you get there. So player skill, not character attributes, a bit of a misnomer, but the idea is when you're faced with a challenge in an OSR style game, you don't want to go straight to the character sheet for the definitive answer. You want that to be information to find the answer in your head. You want to ask questions of the GM. You want to suss out what the world around you looks like, what potential threats there are, what potential resources there are, what obstacles there are, and an idea so that you can have in your mind's eye the theater of the mind, which is another phrase you'll hear often in the OSR world. In the theater of the mind, you can see what's in front of you. You can see what you have to get by it, to get around it, to get through it, or have the knowledge to go back and come back better equipped for what comes. And that's going to be it for this podcast. A very quick one, but something that I think is very important to the idea of OSR style play.